Welcome to my channel. My name is Adina. I'm an intuitive astrologer, and in this video, I have created a presentation talking about the Uranus and Taurus energies. We have had Uranus and Taurus since 2018, and we'll have Uranus and Taurus until 2026. We will get a little taste of Uranus and Gemini in 2025, but then Uranus will retrograde back into Taurus and then officially move into Gemini in 2026. So, what I want to do with this presentation and what I am going to present to you is some of the energies that have already taken place with this energy and what we can expect moving forward and what Uranus and Taurus can bring us collectively and individually. For the first portion of this video, I'm going to go through the presentation and the energies and some of the transits of Uranus and Taurus. And then for the second portion of this video, I'm going to get into all 12 rising signs, showing you where Uranus is transiting in your birth chart, the house that is being affected, and the areas of life that are being affected by this Uranus and Taurus energy and what that can bring for you. So let's get right into this presentation. So, Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius. Uranus is also known as the Great Awakener. Uranus brings liberation, change, inspiration. Uranus rules innovation and innovators and radical ideas, or innovators, inventors, and inventors and innovators, I guess. Uranus also brings chaos, disruption. Uranus brings shock. Uranus is very groundbreaking. Uranus is about doing things outside of the norm, outside of the box. So where you have Uranus in your birth chart can be an area of life where you do things differently, maybe different from societal norms or different from your family. Uranus also rules energy, electricity, and the electrical systems within our body. Uranus is very rebellious. It's about breaking free. This is an energy of breaking free. And always expect the unexpected with Uranus. And Uranus also rules astrology, which I wanted to add there at the end. But Uranus is really this energy that brings disruption. Think of an earthquake. And that can be a Uranus and Taurus energy, right? An earthquake, a literal expression of this energy. Uranus is about breaking free, breaking out of the chains that society has placed upon us or your family has placed upon you. Uranus is about doing things differently. Now let's talk about Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus. Taurus is a fixed earth sign. Taurus is about comfort, stability, security. Taurus rules our food and food supply because Taurus really represents everything we need to feel safe, secure, our livelihood, right? And so Taurus does rule our food and food supply, but also like the food supply chain, but then also especially beef, like cows. And what's really interesting is the changes that have taken place with our meat and especially our beef since Uranus has shifted into Taurus since 2018. Even, and it's interesting because Uranus also kind of ruling like innovations, but it also rules like the lab grown meat is almost like a very literal expression of this Uranus and Taurus energy. Just these different what do you call it? Technological advancements with our food and especially our meat. Now, Taurus also rules money, finances, our banking and financial systems. And so that is another thing that is really amped up since Uranus has been in Taurus is the digital currency, the whole money system, like money systems completely changing, which is going to be a thing, especially with Uranus transiting the final decan of Taurus, which is the end degrees of a sign is the last decan of that sign. And so Uranus is currently at 19 degrees of Taurus and Uranus just stationed direct. So we have Uranus transiting the final decan, the final degrees of Taurus over the next couple of years. And this is where we are really going to see the finalization of everything that has kind of been created and invented since 2018, since Uranus entered Taurus. And so this has to do with our food supply chain, financial systems, the digital currency. Now, Taurus rules wealth and material gain as well. So, and gold and precious metals. But when I say wealth and material gain, like all of our materialistic kind of goods, in a sense, like jewelry can be ruled by a Taurus. It's a very Venus thing. All of those types of things. And so it's also interesting how since Uranus has entered Taurus, there's been a lot more talk of gold and silver. And I think that that's also going to change and be a little amped up with Taurus, or with Uranus transiting these final degrees of Taurus. So now let's look at the dates for Uranus and Taurus. So Uranus first entered Taurus May 15th of 2018 and stayed in Taurus till November 6th of 2018. So we got a little taste of Uranus and Taurus at this time. So if you think back to that time period, what you were navigating, the energies you were moving through, any major themes and topics, that can, kind of show you. And I'm going to actually pull up something that I seen during my research that I thought was really interesting. But the final ingress into Taurus was March 6th of 2019. And that was the final shift that Uranus made into Taurus and did not re-enter Aries. And so the first ingress into Gemini is going to be July 7th of 2025. So this is where we are really going to see some changes take place in our world as a collective. So we really want to be, and we'll get into that later on in the presentation, but this is a really summer of 2025 is going to be very big. Now, Uranus is going to re-enter Taurus November 7th of 2025 until April 25th of 2026, and that will be the final ingress back into Gemini, which I will, of course, create a presentation of Uranus and Gemini as well. But we have a little bit of time. So when I looked and did my research, I wanted to see if there was anything that kind of showed up within that little time period when Uranus first entered Taurus, because that can show us what can possibly show up with Uranus entering Gemini in just a year and a half. So, which we're going to see the buildup now. So we do want to start to pay attention to what is showing up. And I'll talk more about that, but the Gemini energies is more about communication, ideas, how we connect to one another. And so we're definitely going to start to see different ways of communicating. So I will be making a separate forecast, of course, going into the Uranus and Gemini energies, but I just wanted to put that out there that we're going to start to see that build up as Uranus reaches those end degree points, especially next year when Uranus makes that first ingress into Gemini. So a few things that showed up was I thought was interesting was the US-China trade tension. Tension escalated with both countries imposing tariffs on each other's goods, and this marked the beginning of a trade war which has had significant global economic effects, and we're even seeing that still play out now, but that was initiated when Uranus first entered Taurus. Another thing that was really interesting was summer of 2018, there was a lot of heat waves and wildfires. Wildfires have actually been quite prominent since Uranus has been in Taurus. And when you think of Taurus being an earth sign, the first earth sign, I mean, you really do look at global events as far as like weather, like earthquakes, wildfires and things like that just kind of abrupting and coming in suddenly. So I thought that was really interesting how during that summer when Uranus first ingressed into Taurus, there was a lot of heat waves and wildfires. So what to expect? I already kind of touched on this, but let's talk a little bit more about the changes that we can expect with Uranus and Taurus. So changes to our money systems, our banking, financial institutions, and digital currency. That's going to be a really big thing. We've seen that innovation. We've seen what they want to present with that. And so we're going to see an amping up of the digital currency and a huge implementation of that with this last decan. So we want to be paying attention to that. Now, changes to food and food supply, especially the meat, which I already touched on, lab grown meat. This is another thing, and protein, like what they say we can get protein from, or what they want to give us for our protein. Like they've talked about crickets, like eating bugs, like that's something totally been um leaking out that this can be a thing, right? So we're going to see more of these really out of the norm eating things, like things to eat for protein and just things to eat. Even veganism, like vegan amped up with Uranus and Taurus. Like vegan was a big thing, but I feel like the last few years everything's vegan. Like that is another thing. It's like all of these other ways of eating and getting your protein is changing. And so we're really going to see an amping up of that with this last decan. The housing, the housing crisis has been a huge thing. Housing, real estate, property ownership, taxes, all of that stuff, the cost of living and inflation. This is huge for Uranus and Taurus. And it's difficult, but this is still going to be, I believe, a really difficult thing. Like I think we're going to see a lot of instability with prices and inflation, the cost of goods and stuff like that. And this is very much Uranus and Taurus. And I'll talk more about this as I get into the Uranus and Taurus transits that we have left to navigate. Now, some more things to expect is technological advancements in agriculture, which I did kind of talk about that with lab grown meat and also other ways to grow fruits and vegetables and even garden. This is another Uranus and Taurus thing, doing things outside of the box, doing things differently when it has to do with farming and, getting your food supply. And then farming and disruption to the process. And I put that because we're seeing a lot of farmers standing up. There's, in some places, it's literally illegal to farm, or they're making the cost so outrageous for these farmers that they no longer can farm and provide, because it just costs too much. It's not worth it for them. And this is going to be more of a thing. I've even, seen recently, more farmers are protesting. This is part of this Uranus and Taurus energy. This is also a little bit of the Pluto and Aquarius energy, but it really has to do with this Uranus and Taurus energy, farming and food supply and meats. Now, past Uranus and Taurus transits, Uranus was in Taurus from 1934 to 1942. And when I looked back, this was the time period of the Spanish Civil War. And then there was also a few other things kind of coinciding with this energy. It was not necessarily that it was implemented because of the Uranus and Taurus, but it was, I think it began like as Uranus was in those final degrees of Taurus. So significant global events coinciding with the transit was the Great Depression and the early stages of World War II, which really amped up once Uranus entered Gemini. So I really wanted to add that because it seems like we are back at a time period where the cost of living is outrageous. There seems to be a lot of war amping up in the world, and we are again at those final degree points of Taurus. So now let's get into some of the Uranus and Taurus transits. So on January 29th of 2024, we had Mars forming a trine to Uranus. And since it's February, and this is a transit we've already been through, think back to what has really been amping up. And the first thing I think of is the Texas border. Texas, there is a lot going on in Texas when it has to do with the border. A lot of what we would not expect of almost like I almost felt like the beginnings of a civil war, but it's really where the United States is beginning to start to become divided almost. There's some states that are backing up Texas, but then there are some states that are not. And having Mars in Capricorn, which rules government authority, trining Uranus, this is a very clear representation of what this Uranus and Taurus, but also Mars trining Uranus. And so I think seeing this implemented at the time of this Mars trine to Uranus is going to carry into the other transits moving forward. So we really do want to be paying attention to this. But I thought it was really interesting that at the time of this transit, all of that stuff with Texas started to pop off. And also keep in mind that we have to be watching Texas because we have the eclipses going right through Texas. So Texas is a very significant point right now where there's a lot of energy. Now, on March 9th, 2024, we are going to have Mars square Uranus, and this is where we can possibly see a lot of that conflict escalate. We have Mars at this point. Mars is going to be in Aquarius, and this is going to be after the Mars Pluto conjunction, which is really going to amp up, some conflict. This can be very volatile. This can amp up war. This can amp this, Mars rules anger, aggression, and conflict. And so I think that this can be very volatile. I think this is where we can definitely see something arise very suddenly. There can be a lot of chaos because it's Uranus. There can be a lot of disruption with this energy. I think some of this has to do with Texas. So I think we can see a lot going on in Texas at this time. I also think we can see a lot going on with protests at this time and people standing up for what they believe in, whether it's ideologies, religion, whether it is political. Everybody feels very passionate about their beliefs now, and especially having, this North Node Chiron conjunction. This will be after the North Node Chiron conjunction, but that is really going to trigger and activate significant identity wounds where people, where it has to do with people's self-identity, even the identity of countries, the identity of, and this can even also trigger, past wounds and traumas, almost like from old wars. So it's really interesting. But we definitely, can see something pop off at this time. And then when we get to April 20th of 2024, we have the dynamic Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And this is going to take place at 21 degrees, 49 minutes of Taurus. So again, it's in Taurus. This energy is going to be sextiling Mars. Mars is going to be in Pisces, right between Saturn and Neptune. So this is interesting. So this can really show up in a few ways. I think we can definitely see something with digital currency at this time. I think we're going to see a lot with the internet, a lot of technological advancements. I think we're going to see a lot with AI. We just had those Taylor Swift photos leak out, those AI photos. I think there's going to be an amping up of, images like that, whether it's political. We're in the year of the US presidential election. So I really think there's going to be a lot showing up that's going to be very hard to discern, to know, is this true? Is this real? And so we're going to have to, tread lightly. We're going to have to make sure we're being very discerning with what we see. But I really love this. Like, this can bring a lot of shock. It can bring a lot of change. It can bring a lot of chaos, but it's with Jupiter, and Jupiter is the planet of abundance, expansion, opportunity. So I do love this energy. I think that it's not necessarily going to be, the fact that it's sextiling Mars, can bring in this mixed bag, but I might even make a separate video about this Jupiter Uranus conjunction, but this can be inflation as well because it's in Taurus. So we could also see prices rise at this time, which is not necessarily a great thing, right? But this definitely can be a thing with this energy is inflation, prices rising, gas prices rising, just the cost of living rising can definitely be a thing with this energy that we want to watch for. And then also an implementation of digital currency, like maybe they're pushing something out at this time around our money systems, around stuff like that. We could also see, maybe earthquakes and like earthly events with this energy. That can definitely be a thing. And then we'll get into this when we get into all 12 rising signs. You'll kind of know where this is showing up in your own chart, but just the collective energies, money, finances, cost of living. That's really what we're going to see. And then again, possibly stuff with like the technology, AI, and things like that. Now, once we get to July 15th, 2024, we have the Mars Uranus conjunction. Now, we had a Mars Uranus conjunction April 1st of 2022. So if you think back, and this was in Taurus, we've had a few of them, right? This isn't going to be the first Uranus conjunction. But this is the first one at 26 degrees. So this is a new territory. This is a new degree point. But if you want to know how this energy can possibly show up for you, think back to August 1st of 2022, because that is the last time we had the Mars Uranus conjunction in Taurus. Now, collectively, this can bring more to the war that has already been started. This can bring more to inflation. This can bring more to the money systems and all of those Taurian themes and topics. This is where there can just be a lot implemented very aggressively as well. This is a very explosive energy. Your Mars and Uranus can be very explosive. There could be an earthquake. There could be volcanoes. That can definitely be a thing with this. So again, this is a time period that we do want to watch for, all of those kind of themes and topics and things that can happen. And also at this point, Jupiter is going to be in Gemini, which I will be creating a separate a presentation going into that energy. Now, we are going to have another Mars square to Uranus June 15th of 2025. And the reason why it's almost a year later is because we have a Mars retrograde the end of this year, which is going to be really significant. But when we have this Mars square to Uranus, Uranus is right at those final degree points of Taurus. So this can really shake something up. This can really be shaking something up for final breakthroughs, for whatever is left that needs to be changed, and whatever Uranus is doing in Taurus, and whatever Uranus has to finish up shaking up and creating chaos and disrupting. That is when this can happen with this square to Uranus at this 28 degrees. And Mars is going to be in Leo. And Leo has to do with leadership, leaders. So there can definitely be a lot popping off around countries and leaders. Also, royalty can be a thing with this. Leo is a fire sign. So, it can definitely be an intense energy at this point as well. This is also coinciding with some other energies. Like at this point we have Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, which is a huge energy shift, and you've probably seen a lot of astrologers talking about the Saturn Neptune conjunction, which I will make a video going into the Saturn Neptune conjunction as well. But this is when we start to have this conversation between all of the outer planets. We have Saturn and Neptune, we have Uranus, and we have Pluto, and they're all connecting to one another. And this conversation becomes more intense and powerful as the time kind of goes on. Once we get to August 9th of 2025, as you can see, that conversation is almost exact. Like those degree points at this point, Uranus is in Gemini. We have Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, and Pluto at 2 degrees of Aquarius. So by the time we get to summer of 2025, things look very different. Things are in full force and changing rapidly. So we want to keep that in mind. But this is a Uranus kite configuration that I wanted to throw in here. August 9th, 2025. We have a lot going on in this chart. We have Mars in Libra forming a trine to Uranus, Mars forming a trine to Pluto. Mars opposing the Saturn Neptune conjunction. We have the Saturn Neptune conjunction. So this is very big. This is very dynamic. At the same time, we have a Mercury retrograde going on. There's a lot of confusion. There can be a lot of misinformation. There can be, a lot going on that we're not understanding. There cannot be a lot of clarity. And so it's very important to develop a spiritual practice right now, which I talked a lot about in 2023. 2023 was really that year to focus on you and your energy, develop a spiritual practice because you're going to need that internal compass. You're going to need to use your intuition to be very discerning because things are going to get weird. Uranus in Gemini is going to bring a lot of weirdness, and it's really going to start with the Jupiter in Gemini, I believe. Whatever's kind of started with Jupiter and Gemini, when Uranus comes in, that's going to amp up. Then we have another Mars square to Uranus, February 27th, 2026. Mars is going to be in Aquarius. So again, final degree points. Mars is in Aquarius. Aquarius ruling the collective, the people. This can bring more riots. This can bring more protests to what is going on in the world. There could be a lot of war at this time, and a lot of people are standing up for their rights, for their freedoms, and voicing their opinion. I mean, maybe this is people overturning the government. I mean, I don't really know. This could show up in many ways. It's going to be interesting. We have to kind of see how these energies play out leading up into this point. But this is definitely going to be disruptive. There is a lot of countries in this world right now where people are standing up and they are sick and tired of the leadership. They're sick and tired of how, the world is being run or their country is being run. So with Pluto and Aquarius, this is an energy that we're going to see. This is an energy we'll be navigating. This is something we're going to see more of, is a disruption to the collective, to the people, people breaking free or wanting to break free from any chains that are placed upon them from their government, from their leadership, where there's not fairness. And that even goes back to this slide here, this chart, because Mars being in Libra, which is all about balance and harmony and fairness and justice, this can definitely be, summer of 2025 can definitely be a time where people have had enough. People are standing up, where there is injustice, where things are not fair. So now let's get into the all signs forecast, where I talk about Uranus and Taurus and each of the houses, go through each rising sign so that you get an idea of how this energy is showing up for you personally. Aries, you have Uranus transiting your second house of money and finances, material possessions, your livelihood, also your values. So Uranus can be bringing changes to this area of life. You can be starting to do things differently when it has to do with your money, when it has to do with how you make money, when it has to do with your attitude towards money and your livelihood, like maybe how you used to care a lot about materialistic value and materialistic possessions and things. Uranus can be changing that for you, where maybe by the time Uranus leaves Taurus, you don't care so much, or you just think differently about the materialistic world. If you get what I mean. Uranus can also be shaking up your values in some way. While Uranus is transiting this last decan, Uranus will be making a few last disruptions to this area of life. Whatever Uranus is meant to change for you with this transit, the remainder of that change is going to take place. But also, Uranus is going to be, it's also more of a closing out and wrapping up of this energy. Whenever Uranus has disrupted in this area of life, I want to say it's kind of like a settling, but it's not necessarily a settling. It's like a wrapping up of things. So whatever needs to be changed is going to be changed over these next 2 years, but there's going to be a finalizing of it. Like it's wrapping up, like things are finally completing for you with the changes taking place around your money, your finances, and your value. So hopefully that makes sense. Taurus, you have Uranus transiting your first house. So Uranus is really changing your perception of this reality, changing your physical body in some way, changing your attitude, changing how you feel about life and what you want and what you need. Uranus transiting this last decan over the last few years. This is like a wrapping up, and Uranus will be making any final disruptions to this area of your life. So, whatever Uranus has really been changing for you, that is coming to an end almost. So, whatever you've already been navigating when it has to do with enlightenment, this is even an awakening energy. Uranus in the first house can be huge for you, an awakening. It's Uranus in the ninth house as well, and the 12th. But Uranus in the first, Uranus is known as the Great Awakener, and Uranus may have completely changed your perception of this reality and who you are. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. And maybe with Uranus transiting Taurus, you really became aware of that and you completely changed how you view life and how you navigate life, how you navigate this reality. And so there's going to be some final shifts and turns and changes with Uranus in this last decan, but also it's almost like a wrapping up and closing out of the changes. And I hope that makes sense because I know it's kind of confusing because it's like, yes, there's still going to be some changes, but it's that last decan. So it's the final changes that need to be made to complete this entire shift. And I hope that makes sense. Gemini, you have Uranus transiting your 12th house. And so the 12th house has to do with things and places that are hidden. The 12th house can also suppress energy. The 12th house has to do with our subconscious and karma. The 12th house can also have to do with self undoing and self sabotaging behaviors and patterns and cycles. And so Uranus transiting your 12th house may have really shaken this up for you, maybe made you more aware of how you can get in your own way, possibly how you can self sabotage. There may have been some type of an awakening or enlightenment in this area of life. You may have also become more spiritual with this energy, like literally a spiritual awakening, changing you, completely with this. And so, with Uranus transiting this last decan of Taurus over the next few years, there can be like a final hurrah, like a final awakening, a final shift. There can also be a reprogramming of your subconscious in some way, like really shifting, releasing, and letting go karmic cycles, karmic patterns. There's a lot of enlightenment with this energy. So paying attention to, what you're moving through energetically and spiritually is really important. Cancer, you have Uranus transiting your 11th house of friends and friendships, social groups, networking, your affiliations and associations. So Uranus can be completely changing your friendships, completely changing who you want to be friends with, who you want to connect with. Uranus can be, changing your online presence. Like maybe, you didn't really want to be online before 2018 and now you're networking, you're online, maybe you have an online business. Like I'm sure for some of you it may show up in that way. This can also be completely shaking up your friends and friendships. Like maybe your friendships have completely changed and the people you're connected to have completely changed with Uranus in that 11th house. So with Uranus transiting that final decan, the last decan of Taurus, there can be some final disruptions, some final changes in this area of life. Also look at it as, whatever Uranus has already changed for you when it has to do with who you're connected to, groups, associations, online, networking, your friends, your friendships. Look at it as almost a wrapping up of this energy. There is going to be some final twists and turns as Uranus kind of moves through those final degree points. But this is also, too, it's like whatever is left to be changed is going to be changed in this area of life for you over the next couple of years. Leo, you have Uranus in the 10th house of career and public reputation, your public image, what you are known for out in the world and what you want to be known for out in the world. Now, Uranus in the 10th house can be completely shifting your public image in some way. This can be changing you and how you are known out in the world. For example, I know a Leo rising who started reading tarot cards online shortly after 2018 and now has a huge YouTube channel. I mean, that is not going to be for everybody, but it's interesting how that kind of represents this energy. Uranus in Taurus in the 10th house can also to be changing your career and career path. Now, with Uranus moving through this last decan, these final degree points over the next couple of years, there can be some final disruptions, some final changes. And also too, Uranus in the 10th, like Uranus is a very awakening enlightenment energy. So there can also be some enlightenment when it has to do with your online presence and enlightenment when it has to do with your career in some way. And with Uranus transiting that last decan too, look at this as a yes, there's going to be some final disruptions and changes, like whatever Uranus is meant to change in this area of life for you, what is going to be changed over the next couple of years. But it's a wrapping up and finalizing of those changes. Virgo, you have Uranus transiting your 9th house of higher education, higher knowledge, long distance travel, philosophy, your belief systems. Now, Uranus in the 9th house may have brought a huge spiritual awakening for you. Literally in 2018, I'm saying this because I'm Virgo rising, and Uranus in my 9th house. The end of 2018, I had a huge spiritual awakening. Everything changed. I started studying astrology, which astrology is in the 9th house. I took courses, which is in the 9th house. So my Uranus and Taurus transit has been quite literal. And this may be for you too, like maybe even changing you wanting to travel the world or changing your belief systems in some way, maybe becoming interested in religion or changing your religious beliefs. This can also show up as you wanting to study astrology or spirituality or wanting to teach something. That is also a 9th house thing. Now, Uranus transiting that final decan is going to bring the final disruptions to this area of life. Whatever Uranus is meant to change and disrupt in this area, it's almost like it's going to happen over the next couple of years because Uranus is in that final decan, but also look at it as a wrapping up of this energy. This can also be a settling of the changes that have already taken place. Libra, you have Uranus transiting your 8th house of your partner's finances, money coming in from outside resources, also taxes, inheritance. The 8th house also is very psychological. It has a death and rebirth energy, very transformational. And so Uranus being in your 8th house may have completely changed your relationship to money, but also how you receive money, like maybe even your partner's finances may have brought changes to money coming in from outside resources in some way. Look at Uranus transiting this last decan, these last final years. Yes, there can be some final disruptions in this area of life because Uranus is hitting new territory, but this can also be a finalizing and wrapping up of the changes that have already taken place. Uranus is the planet of enlightenment. So there may have also been a lot of psychological changes since 2018 for you. Maybe even literally like an awakening. Because Uranus is the planet of awakening. So there may be just a lot shifting and changing mentally, not necessarily in your physical world, but in your psyche. Scorpio, you have Uranus in your 7th house of not friends, of your relationships, your close personal connections, all your one-on-one connections, your business partnerships. But the 7th house is the house of relationships. So your partner is in that 7th house. And Uranus being in the 7th house may have completely changed who you want to be connected to, may have brought in an unexpected relationship, may have made this area very chaotic for you you over the last few years. And so Uranus transiting that last decan of Taurus, yes, there can be some final disruptions or changes, but Uranus is also the great awakener. So this may have also actually brought in a lot of spiritual connections too for you. A lot of I don't necessarily want to say karmic connections, but there may have been a lot of spiritual connections. There's a lot of enlightenment going on when it has to do with who you want to be connected to and the people that you want to have in your life. So there can still be some disruptions to this area with Uranus transiting the last decan, but whatever Uranus is meant to change in this area of life is going to happen over the next couple of years. But it's also too almost like a wrapping up and finalizing of the changes that have already taken place. Sagittarius, you have Uranus in your sixth house of work, health, and daily routine. So Uranus has been completely changing your health in some way or shifting and changing your routines, maybe even your work. The sixth house is your work, what you do day to day. Your career is in the 10th, but the labor you put into your work is in the sixth. So Uranus may have completely been shifting and changing that for you. Now, there can be more disruptions to this area of life with Uranus transiting that final decan. But look at this as a wrapping up and finalizing too. So, yes, whatever Uranus is meant to change in this area of life is going to happen over the next couple of years. But look at it also as a wrapping up and finalizing and completing of the changes that have already taken place when it has to do with your daily routines, when it has to do with your work, when it has to do with your health and nutrition, when it has to also do with pets. That's also in the sixth house. Capricorn, you have Uranus transiting your fifth house of children, creativity, romance, passion, pleasure, play, hobbies, interests. Uranus may have been completely changing this area of life for you, especially when and maybe when it has to when it has to do with children as well. Like maybe Uranus transiting the fifth, you've had children. Maybe before Uranus didn't enter your fifth house, you didn't. Like Uranus may have literally brought children into your life, which would have completely changed this for you. This can also be a form of enlightenment when it has to do with romantic connections or what you want in romantic connections. There can be changes here when it has to do with creative pursuits, your hobbies, your interests, what you find passion in. Uranus may have been changing, that all up for you. Now, with Uranus transiting that final decan of your fifth house, yes, there's going to be some final disruptions to this area of life. However, look at it as a completion, a finalizing of the changes that have already taken place. Uranus is also the planet of enlightenment, of awakening. And so there's a lot of almost spiritual awakening as well happening in this area of life. Aquarius, you have Uranus transiting your fourth house of home, family, property, and real estate. So since 2018, Uranus has been shaking this area of life up for you. Maybe you found it very hard to find a home, like maybe you've been moving a lot. That can definitely be a thing with Uranus in the fourth house. There hasn't been a lot of stability when it has to do with home and family. That can definitely be a thing. Like you just been going through a lot of moves. So with Uranus transiting that final decan, yes, there can still be a lot of instability in this area. Whatever Uranus is meant to disrupt in this area of life, that's going to take place, over the next a couple of years. However, also look at it as a finalizing and completing of the disruption and changes that have already taken place. So while there can still be some disruptions, it's almost to like a calming down, like a settling, like a completion when it has to do with your home, when it has to do with family, and then also property, real estate, roots, and possibly even parents. Pisces, you have Uranus transiting your third house of communication, your mindset, also community, neighbors, your neighborhood, local travel, vehicles. Also, siblings and cousins are in the third house. So, Uranus has been completely changing and shifting this area of life up for you. Maybe even too bringing some disruption to this area of life. Maybe there's been a lot of issues with vehicles since 2018. Maybe there's been a lot of disruption when it has to do with your relationship to your siblings or extended family. This can also be a very enlightening and awakening energy because it rules your mind, your mindset, your thoughts, and Uranus is the great awakener. So there may have also been some type of a spiritual awakening taking place since 2018. Now, with Uranus transiting that final decan, look at this as any final changes that are meant to happen in this area of life are going to take place over the next couple of years. But also look at it as a finalizing, as a completing of the changes that have already taken place. So when it has to do with your mindset, when it has to do with your connections, like to your community, your neighbors, your neighborhood, vehicles, all those third house themes and topics. Yes, there can still, like I mentioned, be disruptions, but it is like a completion here.